I just want to say that in our Quaker work we are faced with the difficulty that a particular party has been in power for a long time now. So that when we survey the field of truth and integrity, it's inevitable that a lot of the finger pointing will be at the Conservative Party. But we are emphatically not party political, and we also see transgressions on the other side of the House. Most notably, of course, over the Iraq War and the basis on which we were taken into that war by Prime Minister Blair. And at the present time, there are very strange things going on in the Labour Party to do with anti-Semitism. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with what's called the Al Jazeera files. Good, you are, Anne. Maybe you can explain them to me. To me, they're a great mystery. Are other people unfamiliar with the Al Jazeera files? Well, most of you are. You're not. And I may be summarising this incorrectly because I find it such a labyrinth, and I don't want to go into great detail about it, but it shows that skullduggery is going on in the Labour Party as well, and the general thesis seems to be that a lot of files have been discovered showing that instances of anti-Semitism were not acted on by the Labour Party management when Corbyn was in power, so that he could be blamed for not taking action against anti-Semitism. I hope that's an accurate description, but it doesn't really matter. We have seen transgressions on both sides of the House, and these go back a long, long way. If you go back to the 18th century, we notionally had democracy. Where I lived was a rotten borough, so there was no democracy there. And the standards to which I think we're aspiring go back to Victorian times. And we've seen a slippage recently from those standards, not just in this country, but most notably in the United States and in other democracies. And that's what we're concerned about. And I think our unique slant, well, maybe it's not unique, but our particular slant, is to try and emphasize the good. By shining a light on the good, we also eliminate the bad. And that seems to be a bit of a gap in the market. There's a myriad of organisations that have sprung up, and they'll be popping into your inboxes all the time with exhortations to do this, that and the other. And most of these are pointing up failures in the system, institutional failures and failures of practice. As Peter said, the Quakers have had a very close link with truth from the very beginning as friends of the truth. I don't know if people stopped to ask them what the truth was. And that's a question I think we should be addressing ourselves today. Truth is often equated with truthfulness, but it obviously goes much further than that. There's also truth in the factual sense, that truth is meant to correspond with reality. And that comes hurtling up against the problem of what is reality. Because your reality may not be the same as mine, because you're sitting in a different part of the room and the light is different, and your cognitive experiences and processes are different from mine, which gets us into the whole postmodernist approach to truth, that truth is context-bound, is contingent, rather than absolute. And that makes it very difficult if you have a non-absolute form of truth. Truth becomes elusive. But there's also a deeper level of truth, with which I think we're all familiar. And that is the truth that went unexpressed when Jesus was before Pilate. And Pilate asks him, what is truth? And then there's that wonderful journalistic device, and I think it must have been a journalistic device, because how could the gospel have overheard what was being said? I doubt that he was standing in the front rank. So I think this is an invention, and it's a brilliant one. Instead of an elaborate explanation, we get silence. And that silence is just pregnant with meaning. Jesus is asked, what is truth? and stands there. And what does that convey? Well, he himself put it in a different way when he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And Paul equated truth with God. And all these are synonyms, I think. They're metaphors or concepts for things that we can't ultimately put into words. And that's where our organisation, QT, is coming from. And I think it's where all the great faiths come from, at heart. This is, at essence, what we're about. It's a recognition of an indefinable, wordless truth. Psalm 24, full of metaphor. But I don't think anyone really believes that vengeful God is organising things in quite the way it says. But we get the meaning beyond that because it's metaphorical. So that is our starting point. The elusive nature of truth, but it's a truth that connects us to the world around us. It's a world of oneness, of unity, and consequently of compassion, of reaching out, of understanding, in a way that has become vital in the present world if we're to survive in any meaningful form. When I say vital, I mean just that. And what we're trying to do in our tiny way in Quakers is to try and bring truth and integrity back to centre stage in the public discourse. Not just as an ethical desirability, but as a functional necessity, as an imperative for dealing with the huge issues that we face. We can't tackle climate change unless we can establish the truth in factual terms that are recognised by, universally recognised and acted upon. And democracy can't survive effectively in the absence of truth, as we've seen with the midterm elections where things were thought to be on a knife edge. And fortunately, America retreated from that particular brink. But we've seen how vulnerable democracy is in what we thought was one of the most leading democracies in the world. And we've seen how conspiracies and departures from truth can get a life of their own. And we can look into the reasons for this, the role that social media has played, the role that Russia has played, perhaps the way in which people in fearful circumstances, in a climate of uncertainty, retreat into way out thinking in little groups because they can draw comfort from that. So what is QTIC doing? Well, we were set up very recently. We've become what's known as a Quaker recognised body, which means that the work is not performed by central staff, but by Quakers throughout Britain. We've coalesced to form this new group, but it has official status, and as such does get support from central staff. And I think it's fair to say that we've struck a resonant chord among friends, that it's clear that truth and integrity are an enormous issue for many Quakers, as they are for many people in other faiths and non-faith groups as well. Now, we're a small group, we're a small religious organisation, and we have had to focus on what we can do rather than get caught up in aspirations. The first thing we did was to produce a declaration, which you may or may not have seen, which I think is somewhere. I'll read just a few short passages from it. As people of faith, we seek a world transformed, including this microphone, where compassion, equality, truth and integrity are guiding principles. In the meantime, our belief in equality and the intrinsic worth of each individual means that we value democracy as a form of government. What we've committed ourselves to: 1. Upholding standards of honesty and integrity in our lives and organisations. Acknowledging that the majority of those in public life are people of goodwill, and finding ways of working respectively with them on the kind of grounds that Peter has mentioned. And then we come to the Nolan principles that Paul splendidly introduced at the beginning. I gave a talk on Tuesday night to a local group of about 30 people, and I asked them who had heard of the Nolan principles, and 3 hands went up, just 3. And these were people I would have thought were well informed. And then I said, well, just like Paul, let's enumerate them, and with a great deal of struggling they got about 4 of them. And yet, the Nolan principles have been very much in the news, but don't seem to have cut through to any popular understanding. There was a Westminster Hall debate, which is not a normal parliamentary debate, but I don't quite understand something that I can explain, but it's held in Westminster Hall, on the 7 principles of public life, the Nolan principles. That was in early September. A Quaker MP with Cadbury spoke. I think there were about 6 or 7 contributors. There was no one present from the Conservative Party, except for the minister who was required by law to be there, and her PPS. No one. And I wrote to my MP and said, well, isn't this rather an important subject? Why was no one there? And it was at a time of great turmoil, with the whole business of the Prime Ministerial revolving door, but I didn't get a reply from my MP, which was unusual. So we endorse the need for the Nolan principles to be a key part of public life. They're not statutory, and much could be done to give them more clout. Another aim is to work towards a system of truly inclusive participatory democracy, where people really feel taken into account. We encourage constitutional reform and the promotion of higher standards of truth within the media. And all this is based on that elusive sense of truth. And what we've written about that, and this took a lot of drafting, we may not have got it quite right, but we're not operating in isolation. We're seeking to build a bigger network. We feel that many others are with us on this and are wondering what the way forward is, how can we be effective. So we want to reach out to other faith groups like yourselves, and if necessary and possible, to non-faith groups. And then, as a faith group, how do you convey that in a way that is generally acceptable? A huge problem, use the word God, and many people will just, at that moment, stop reading. Whether we like it or not, that is how it is, and yet many of those people are ones that we want to reach. We have said, at the core of Quakerism, we experience a sense of oneness, wonder, and mystery. That universal sense provides the basis for the cooperation so urgently needed in our troubled world. And I think that people from any faith, and none, should be able to come together around that sense of oneness, wonder, and mystery. It's something you find in the scientific community. and in other faiths, in Hinduism, that's embraced by the concept of Satya. Without which the universe and reality fall apart, Satya being the essence. In Islam, you get Al-Haq, where Haq means truth. So this is one name of God in the Quran, of God in the sense of ultimate reality. And similarly in Buddhism, we have conventional day-to-day truth and ultimate truth. And in ultimate truth, there are no distinctive things or beings. We have the unity of all things. And that, I firmly believe, is the position we have to reach, the unity of all things, getting away from intense individualism if we're to have any chance of dealing with the issues at hand. And this is one small attempt to try and widen that circle out. Thank you.